Good afternoon, Abbotsford residents. I'm Mr. Pelican. I'm running for the mayor of Abbotsford on the insider trading. It's pretty much the community knows now that council and mayor, we're not council and mayor, but they're lifting to the job sites. Abbotsford, I want to begin today by explaining something very clear before I move forward. Abbotsford is so grateful and so thankful for the men and women that work in the Mission RCMP. When the attempted murder came in broad daylight on my life by Henry Brown and Abbotsford friends of Henry's, that sergeants and police chief used the company to pull the multi-millionaire a favor because it would pull down all the political people in the back, Ed and Mike, leaving victims. The RCMP mission knew with the amount of evidence and witnesses, there's no way you could do this. The Abbotsford police were being run by political people, the sergeants and investigating staff sergeants, and I believe they're into all the organized crime, and that's not why. Once you do this, you'll be asking the officers at night to seize the fentanyl and bring it to your house to sell it. In my opinion, you're already doing it. Once you're gone this far, this is organized crime, the attempted murder, too many witnesses, and then using their friends on the police force to threaten. No one saw it coming because the Mission RCMP were that good. They were that good. The Abbotsford men and women and Henry and Ed and Mike with Ross Siemens believed that you would have to go into the Abbotsford police and then they could do the damage. When the RCMP put it to test to go to Ed Fast to get the RCMP in at the federal level, because it had the premier's M.L.As like Pam involved on Riverside lifting it. When Ed and Mike, and especially Mike DeYoung, said cut a deal, Henry owns bloody Abbotsford. The RCMP knew that now Ed Fast was calling Henry and leaking the information, which witnesses were there, and this is how they were getting threatened by Henry's friends on the police force. It was no longer a police force. They believed in their warped, sick, retarded mind that the company could overcome it. The company can make anybody look like a conspiracy and everything. The RCMP knew. When you have Bruce Bam and the M.L.A. and the former mayors, some of his best friends witnessed that, she's locked in tight, especially when the cops were threatening. And you have many dignitaries and leaders in your house, which Henry didn't know in the Abbotsford police, she's locked in tighter. I want to tell you this, a few men in the RCMP that knew the scope of law, knew what's right for another human being, and knew what the Abbotsford police were doing, pissed all over them. It is now that the Abbotsford police, you will see them being bailed out by the top that need them for the land deals. I believe it's right in David Eby's office, and I want to explain something. They were all blackjacking each other and threatening. When the RCMP knew that Henry and his son were doing insider trading, and his son was in front on job lifts when Henry stepped out because of conflict of interest, they could watch them city auditorium videos. And they sat me down and said, well, Henry excused himself, but his son's there, which is the proving officer. Henry knew the city councils that he blackjacked and had in his house, and he was lifting special things like Ross's gas station. If they blocked Darren Braun, he would wreck them and scandal them and bring them under charges in the environment and everything. This is the danger Brenda Locke was worried about, the private police in Surrey, because now MLAs and MPs would set up the bat for developers, and it was the rich elites, pushing down the community and leaving them for body bags. That should have never been done. The men and women that serve in the Abbotsford police believe, let me explain, they believe that they're very important to this town and they operate this town a service and they're there for your safety. They're absolutely retarded in the head. The RCMP officers in mission wasted no time for your safety. Your life was threatened. They didn't come to the hospital. They didn't apologize. There was nothing here. That is all bullshit out of that office that is doing political damage and even Colin Watts' guy when he smashed his camera and made accusations. You got officers that are at the top of the police force running bloody fucking wild, pardon my language, just running wild. And the company was saving them, and now that you can see Henry can't get into the company and do damage control, they don't know which way to go. They always defended on Henry and the politicians to clean it, and they could never do nothing for the body of law. They don't know which way to go. They don't know to investigate insider trading, collaborating, racketeering, nothing. Just dumbfounded. This is why the RCMP are so great. So let me explain something again. Without the help of the mission RCMP, a few men, just a few men, this would never have been possible. Making sure witnesses and dignitaries and elite witnesses to carry weight over the Abbotsford police, over Ed Fast and Mike DeYoung, some of the tops. And I made it clear that I showed you Neufelg was in my house. I showed you Rianne Gasper, the M.L.A. of the Conservatives, John Rustad. I showed you even Manji Sohi came. I showed you that Gurpreet Rai was there. I showed you many people. When you try to kill somebody in this broad daylight, it sparks a spark, especially politicians. There is no believing in the Abbotsford police that they're vital on the task force and they need to save. You got to start firing them out and now disciplining them and kicking them off. The attack on the South Asians, Mogil, was already disconnecting the Abbotsford police from working in the temples because it was deliberately done to block them. Blocking them on the police board and everything. It was a Mennonite mob that was setting up for lavish jobs. I'm on Tracy Road again, and I want to light up Ian Paton. Ian Paton is the ag critic, and why he is not going out on the Mackenzie Bog or helping Caroline Findlay when David Eby's climbing in the polls to bring him down is because of this reason. Let me explain it to you. The M.L.As of the B.C Conservative, KORY Neufelg, #1, is very best friends with Ross Siemens. If you call this out against David Eby, it hurts Ross Siemens, the money that came in and everything, and KORY couldn't do that for his party. KORY is too busy shadowing Amric Moran, what has cheated massively, rather than helping Caroline Findlay. It'd be best now that Caroline Findlay calls up Bruce Banman and says, walk me through Abbotsford so I can put David Eby on the heels. So let me explain to Caroline Findlay. Dave Sidhu is a sitting city council. They were a team under Abbotsford First, called Abbotsford First with Ross Siemens. Henry Brown needed them to win decisions over the city. Henry's son, who was a proving officer and economic development officer in the city, and the city manager and the city lawyer. Henry pointed his brother on the police board, Mark Warkentine. He had the whole system set up, and there was no way around it. Till Darren Brown opened the mouth and the mission RCP got involved. Henry needed them counsel for changing zonings on Cooper's Farm over to 3,000 and laughing and giggling, ribbing Rob Funks and stealing the money. In return, Henry owed them. When it came to the election and the RCMP said, Mr. Pelican, this is a very hard thing to prove, but we want you to do us a favor. And I said, anything, Abbotsford's ready to do anything with you. Run for the election so we can see all the institutions that are going to block to paint the clear picture. And then they saw it. They knew it. Vicky Hopes, the Chamber of Commerce holding the debate. But Dave Sidhu, the sitting city council that helped Ross with all the South Asians, and Andy Sidhu, the chancellor of UFE, owned a shit old little rag called the Capritra newspaper. He blocked all the candidates, and I showed you in his newspaper, and only put John Doe, and published his name and Ross's name. They were the best of friends. Dave sat on all the decisions that were insider trading with Henry's son. He knew about the bus terminal that Henry lifted and damaged them homes. Dave Sidhu's inside people made it clear that Dave Sidhu would not come up behind Lou's Bar and Grill and help any of his South Asians with an article what Henry and the developer did. Protecting Henry and council. He was blackjacking him. Dave Sidhu needed to be rewarded for all the risks he took and all the information he knew. He told his best buddy, Ross Siemens, and this was clear, you take my dad's piece of property and you give it a significant lift and you find a big big buyer that no politician or anybody will challenge. So they hooked him directly to the NDP, David Eby. They approached Vitalis, which is the Vanderpools, to come here and buy Andy Sidhu's raspberries and push it under and create an ag co-op, okay, a cooperative, I should say. Under the cooperative, you'd have to have farmers and quota, and they didn't do it. Vitalis is privately owned. Then all the chemicals they got to use to knock the enzymes and everything out goes into a sewer. Then they lobbied to have the free money on a grant to Vitalis, which was a corporate welfare handout, protecting the city by KORY Neufelg hanging in there as his friends. If you damage Ross and you call Eby out, Eby's got to say, I'm going to throw the RCMP in because I didn't do it. And then, so KORY knew that. He knows to shut his mouth and not call it out, and it hurts the BC Conservatives. And he and Paton needs to make sure that Caroline Findlay watches today. Many politicians came into Abbotsford to help the town and make sure it's public knowledge, not only for my mayorship, run, win or lose, I could care less, but for the law to get involved. And a lot of officers to face criminal charges and go to prison, so the example can be there, and no millionaire will ever walk in and walk free for attempted murders and rigging job sites and using police to threaten to run people out of town. The RCMP, we're too smart in this. That shit upstairs, it's just shit. They're probably stealing the fentanyl, in my opinion, going to Colin Watts' house and shooting up and lighting up. You can't trust them no more. They cannot be trusted. That is proven. But under the company, they were going to bail it out. The only ones who were bailing it out was Ed, Mike, and Henry. It was a political politician police force that had no more governance. It didn't represent the law. It was just shit, from picking up prostitutes to everything. They needed to warn Dave Sidhu, and Dave Sidhu was not going to go down. He wanted this money. They distanced themselves from Dave. You could see it. They don't take pictures with Dave. They dropped them like a hot potato. And they're promoting M.L.A. And Ross is in the party with M.L.A. And I showed you Mark Warkentine, the LLP that knows insider trading. I showed you Mike DeYoung, and I showed you Simon Gibson. All of them involved to load M.L.A. over Dave Sidhu. In return, they lifted and brought Vitalis in here to buy Andy Sidhu's property. When there's about 5,000 farmers, they could put it on. And they used the NDP as weight that nobody would challenge the NDP or take it to the rest. Then when the neighbors came for the decisions and hearings, they rigged it upstairs, and no matter what was done at the council meeting, it was going through. Dave Sidhu knew that information. He leveraged off the city. He knew to lift it to his dad, and Ross was involved. It was shush money to shut Dave Sidhu up. It is still 100% insider trading. And now KORY Neufelg, the prime example. I can't call it out because Ross is his best friend. If KORY shits on the NDP, David Eby's got to prove that I'm not loading Abbotsford with BC's taxpayers' money and it's going missing. The Barreltown Waterworks, all this, the Mackenzie Bog, the Ron Funk's change, and he's got to light up the RCMP. So KORY sits there, let's get Amrick in. Amrick's supposed to be some doofus lawyer of 25 years that chases ambulances, and he would know that attempted murder in broad daylight with them many witnesses is where you should be chasing and not some city council job, especially at the magnitude of the police chief himself, Mike Sir, involved in leading in officers. Then the major witnesses that witnessed the Abbotsford police chased the victim, myself, to try to get me out of town. The goodness of the RCMP. The RCMP knew a few weeks ago the Abbotsford police were still chasing me and threatening me because Henry and his establishment and the people that stand to go to jail for insider trading in these big construction companies. Remember, David Eby went after clubhouses, which was illegal. He would phone his friends at the Abbotsford police and tell them not for me to stand in front of the city or these signs with his son or anything that's illegal, because I knew it from Wall Financial, Acklini, Mike Dakota. He knew the city people in the inside have had enough of Ross. They know they're loading Ross. It wasn't about this town. They could see the jobs. They saw Darren Brown steal all the information and vital information out of the city and went out and started selling jobs, and he was the applicant on the zoning and the planning and headhunted the constructions. The city staff also knew that all the council are best friends of Dave Sidhu or of Darren Brown, and we're loading. In order for Dave Sidhu to shut his mouth, Andy Sidhu for rigging the election at UFV, Andy called me in with his wife, and I want David Eby and Caroline Findlay to hear it, in his newspaper, and he said, quote, "My shithole garbage son, Dave Sidhu, blocked you in the newspaper of which I own, the Caprito newspaper, to load Ross Siemens. And he went to UFV when you're the chancellor, Andy was the chancellor, and he did all that, took all your information, all your political stuff, and he got UFV to threaten you and not me." Now Andy knew that, and he should have went to the authorities, and I don't think Dave Sidhu did that. Andy was the chancellor. UFV didn't want to go down a road of lawsuits, so they let Andy go. I was quite happy with that. But then Andy's return for losing his career, the damage and everything, and all the help he did, was to be rewarded on a significant lift and use the NDP as a buyer and get Vitalis to buy it, lift the land for more than what it was, help through the city through all permits and everything. It's Ian Paton's job now to stand for Caroline Findlay and say, is David Eby in town last week in Ross's office to get his cash payout from Vitalis on this illegal insider trading job? And if he ain't, David Eby now should be shutting down the job and ordering it all pushed and planted back to Raspberries, and a special investigation by the RCMP, not Bob Rich, not somebody Eby and Henry knew, and Mike Sir, or this dumb Colin Watts, on Andy Sidhu's on Huntington and McCallum, his brand new house that was rushed and everything. It's insider trading. Dave knew this, and Dave took advantage of it, and this is why Dave didn't help them homeowners, wouldn't write nothing that his South Asians were being taxed in anything. It was for money. Abbotsford, Canada, you have to understand this. A next door municipality to Abbotsford, BC is Mission. A few men in Mission in the RCMP opened their hearts, opened their door, and knew what the scope of law was, and knew they could search my record, and why was I being threatened. They knew when mayor and council weren't coming up to the houses and calling each other out, they were working together. They tried to fool the RCMP because Abbotsford police, unless we charge and the shit goes forward, they got this bloody myth going on in Abbotsford, operating in the night, picking up prostitutes. There was no policing here. The RCMP knew when you got this magnitude of politicians and eyewitnesses, the company itself, and no matter what they argue of how important, the task force has got to stay. We're connected in the town. Yeah, you know where all the fentanyl is. And when they saw Mike de Jong's illegal party, they made me live stream it and call it out because it was preferential treatment. And Mike was involved with cover-up. It's got some of the leading politicians in the RCMP know when they don't see Pierre Poilievre coming into town on a major flood that could hurt Carney and everything, and Brad lobbying, they could see it all. The picture paints it faster than I can explain it to the RCMP. They could see Ross Siemens, his wife, not taking a picture with him, and they could see it all, and they know it all. But an attempted murder should have never been looked away from. Not by any individual, never mind the policing, by any individual. And the RCMP didn't look away when it was that clear. And then to threaten the people to get them out of town. So if they did this for Henry, you imagine what they're doing for the rich gangs, the rich cartel, and everything else. You can't be trusted. Colin Watts can paint all the picture in the world, but when Colin Watts didn't open his door and bring the witnesses in and sit down, or go out, and when he was given invitations, you know Colin Watts is a bunch of shit, because that's not how you do damage control. You know Colin Watts will be writing speeches, probably Mike's there, Ed's there, Henry's there, probably Rick Rake's there, speeches of how he could save the company. It is so bloody obvious, from Darren Brown's Blue Skies inside trader, to Rob Funk, to all the job sites, to Peter Sparanese quitting, to everything. This was a mob operating to push Abbotsford down, its voters down, and gouge the job sites, make sure that the federal and provincial money came to all them, and they were in control. They couldn't go set it up in any other municipality because of the RCMP. They headhunted. They made sure the first thing they did was grab the Abbotsford police. Henry pointed the boards, pointed his friends, pointed his brothers, pointed his son as economic development officer. Then he started pointing his personal friends, rewarding them and everything. Till Darren Brown opened his mouth. And this is why the RCMP knew, Mr. Pelican. This is why the Abbotsford police, every time you podcast, they're smashing your camera and threatening you. Not because they got a hate against you, it's because some rich asshole stands now to go to jail and pull mega companies and construction companies down, and he's paying officers because zoning permits, city halls, and other people and politicians knows that that shit is illegal. And Darren Brown took that information to sell it to contractors to get the lift. There was no police department here. We cannot listen to Colin Watts and his shit and his guys. You cannot. It's gone too far. He doesn't even understand this. He's so mentally retarded with his guys and his shithole badge. It's just unbelievable. You need a total overhaul. You need the RCMP in because 90% of the crime is not getting solved because it's their friends and their friends. And this here is insider trading. And this here, the RCMP don't care about a Dave Sidhu. They don't care about a David Eby. They don't care about an Ian Paton. They say Dave Sidhu took that information. He's a city council. He lifted his dad's job and his dad's property to gain for all the stuff he was winning and decisions on the city council. This is the best, the RCMP. So I want to call Ian Paton out tonight. Do you not think that Caroline Findlay should come into town and smash the crap out of KORY Neufelg? And now this is why my M.L.As are not standing up in Abbotsford, because they befriended them. So let me tell you my opinion. Ross said, oh, listen, KORY, if you call that out, KORY baby, and you squeeze David Eby and you call all this insider trading, it'll come at me and Dave will lose the money. And KORY went in the corner, yes, Rossi, throw me another party. Oh, we're having one for Amric, what which we need in. And this is what they were doing. Amric Moran wants to win the city council. Show all the South Asians he can, because he's with the establishment that's got to load him. And this is what was wrong. These are threats on residents. This is attempted murder and people left for dead by the police force, not gangs, by the Abbotsford police force. This is another municipality helping, the RCMP helping. This is just, it was out of control. This is why crime wasn't. And every time the Abbotsford police were in trouble, rather than fired or kicked out or called by the mayor was cleaning them because he was using them. People like Henry Brown don't get to walk around free. Assholes like Ed Fast, the MP, don't get to retire and be free when he knew and he had a major part in it. Mike DeYoung, Attorney General, former Attorney General, and a sitting M.L.A, telling you to cut a deal that Henry owns bloody Abbotsford. And this is why they locked down the Abbotsford police from having any South Asians on the border or anything. It was on the Mennonite clique. It won't take the RCMP very long with all the witnesses and everything. But Ian Paton, you got to get a set of balls underneath you, and you got to tell your leader, Caroline Findlay, the NDP's climbing because assholes like KORY Neufelg have befriended the city council, and if he calls this out, it damages them. And this is why he didn't call this insider trading or help any of their residents. I don't care, KORY. I don't care about it. I care about my town. I care about my residents. I care about transparency, and I care what the RCMP worked so hard with Abbotsford to say assholes went into the city and they hijacked it. And then they were using the Abbotsford police when anybody was going to podcast to beat them out and go after them and chase them down so they didn't come forward. I'm live, Abbotsford, British Columbia, Dave Sidhu's property, Tracy Road, Caroline Findlay.